He was just doing routine maintenance on pod 34L887 when his entire life changed forever. Nathan Cross had serviced this particular cryopod hundreds of times over 3 years, never expecting the alien girl inside to be the last princess of a fallen empire. And he certainly never expected an ancient alien protocol to bind him to her as her chosen guardian for reasons he was only beginning to understand. Nathan Cross was a 31-year-old cryopod maintenance technician in Denver, Colorado. Most people saw him as just another gray-uniformed worker in the massive altitude preservation facility. But what they didn't know was that Nate spent his nights maintaining pods that no one else cared about. Orphan pods. Cryogenic units containing aliens whose families had forgotten them, whose civilizations had fallen, whose funds had run out centuries ago. What I'm about to tell you is the story of how one man's quiet act of compassion activated a protocol older than human civilization. How a princess who'd been frozen for over 4 centuries found someone who cared when the entire galaxy had moved on. And how sometimes the universe rewards loyalty in ways we never see coming. If you've ever felt invisible, like your sacrifices went unnoticed, or wondered if small acts of kindness actually matter, then hit that like button and subscribe, because this story will show you that compassion has power beyond measure, even across the stars. The clock on the facility wall read 3:47 a.m. when Nathan Cross made his way through Sector 7 of the Denver Altitude Preservation Facility. His footsteps echoed against the metal flooring. The only sound besides the constant hum of 47,000 cryopods maintaining their precious cargo in suspended animation. Most technicians avoided the night shift in the orphan sector. There was something deeply unsettling about walking among thousands of forgotten souls, beings who'd been asleep for decades or centuries while the galaxy moved on without them. But Nate preferred it this way: fewer supervisors, fewer questions. Just him and the silent sleepers who needed someone to remember they existed. He stopped in front of pod 34L887, his tablet displaying its minimal information. Alien female, species unknown, no funding for 409 years. That was it. No name, no family contact, no civilization to claim her. Just another orphan in a facility that had become more graveyard than hospital. "Hey, 887, Nate said softly, a habit he'd developed years ago. Talking to the pods made the loneliness bearable. "Your cooling system's acting up again. Don't worry, I've got you." He opened the maintenance panel, immediately seeing the problem. The refrigeration circuit was degrading, the connections corroded by centuries of use. If left alone for another month, the pod would fail. The occupant would either die in her sleep or wake up to catastrophic system failure. Nate had seen it happen before. He'd held his brother's hand while it happened. 4 years ago, Lucas Cross had died because Nate couldn't afford to keep his pod running. His little brother had been 14 when he went into cryostasis, suffering from severe cystic fibrosis. The doctors had promised that in 5 to 10 years, genetic therapy would advance enough to cure him. Nate, 17 at the time, had made a promise. "I'll work at the facility. I'll take care of your pod personally. When you wake up, I'll be there." He'd kept that promise. Got hired at 22, worked double shifts, spent every penny on Lucas's pod maintenance. But when their parents died in an accident when Nate was 25, the inheritance wasn't enough. Despite working himself to exhaustion, despite sacrificing everything, the facility had given him the notice at age 27. Pod 19C441 would be deactivated due to insufficient funds. Lucas had been disconnected and slowly thawed over 48 hours. He never regained consciousness. 21 years old in biological stasis, he'd simply faded away while Nate held his hand and whispered apologies. That was 4 years ago. Since then, Nate had transferred exclusively to the orphan sector. If he couldn't save Lucas, he'd save everyone else. He used his own money for unauthorized repairs, worked unpaid hours, falsified maintenance reports to buy pods more time. It was his crusade, his penance, his way of fighting a system that let people die over money. "Okay, 887, "This might sting a bit," Nate murmured, disconnecting the corroded circuit. "But I promise, I'll keep you safe." The moment his fingers touched the pod's control panel, something extraordinary happened. The entire pod illuminated with golden light, bright enough to make Nate stumble backward. Emergency lights began flashing throughout the sector. Then a voice, synthesized but unmistakably ancient, resonated from the pod's speakers. "Protocol. Guardian detection initiated." "What the hell?" Nate's heart hammered as he stared at the glowing pod. "Scanning individual, Nathan Cross. Occupation, cryogenic maintenance technician, level 2, analysis commencing." The pod's screen lit up with data scrolling faster than Nate could read. Then it slowed, displaying information that made his blood run cold. Nathan Cross maintenance record, 247 visits to pod 34L887 over 36 months. Financial investment, 47,000 USD personal funds. Motivation analysis, altruistic protection, emotional resonance. Survivor's guilt transformed into guardian instinct. No expectation of reward detected. No knowledge of occupant's identity detected. "How do you know all that?" Nate whispered. Conclusion: Guardian criteria satisfied. Nathan Cross recognized as chosen guardian under Shivalan Royal Protocol, Article 7, Section 3. Initiating permanent biometric bond. "Wait, Shivalan? That empire fell 200 years ago." The screen changed, displaying an image that stole Nate's breath. Inside the pod lay a young woman who looked barely older than a teenager. Her skin had an ivory luminescence, even in stasis. Silver hair flowed around her face, and delicate golden markings traced patterns along her cheekbones. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost impossible, features too perfect to be real. Occupant identification: Princess Valara Shivalan. Age: biological 19, chronological 431. Status: last surviving heir of the Shivalan imperial bloodline. Current classification: cryogenic orphan, 412 years without family contact. Nate's legs felt weak. Princess of a dead empire? Guardian Cross: your loyalty to an unknown occupant over 36 months has activated the Shivalan Guardian Protocol. This protocol was designed to identify individuals of exceptional character who demonstrate protection without expectation of reward. You are now bound as Princess Valara's chosen guardian. Pod 34L887 is now locked to your biometric signature. Only you may authorize her awakening. This has to be a malfunction, Nate said. But even as he spoke, he felt something strange, a warmth in his chest, like a connection forming. It was similar to the feeling he'd had when Lucas was alive, that sense of responsibility for someone's well-being, but stronger, more profound. Protocol is irreversible. Welcome, Guardian Cross. The golden light faded, leaving Nate alone with 47,000 sleeping souls and one who'd just changed everything. His tablet buzzed. A message from Supervisor Hayes. Cross, what the hell just happened in Sector 7? Every alarm in the building went off. Get to my office. Now. Nate looked at the pod, at the sleeping princess inside. Princess Valara Shivalan, last of her kind, forgotten by history, classified as an orphan for over 4 centuries. And now, somehow, his responsibility. What did you just do to me, 887? He whispered. The pod's screen displayed a single line of text. Thank you for remembering me when everyone else forgot. Nate felt tears burning his eyes, because he knew exactly what that felt like. 20 minutes later, Nate sat in Supervisor Hayes' office while his boss paced back and forth, reading the report on his screen with increasing disbelief. Let me get this straight, Hayes said. You accidentally activated an ancient alien royal protocol that's been dormant for over 400 years. I was just replacing a circuit, Nate protested. And now you're legally bound as the guardian of a princess from an empire that collapsed 2 centuries ago? Apparently. Hayes ran his hand through his graying hair. Nate, do you have any idea what kind of bureaucratic nightmare this creates? If she's genuinely royalty, there are galactic heritage laws, political implications, not to mention the fact that her pod is scheduled for deactivation in 8 months due to accumulated debt. The words hit Nate like a physical blow. 8 months? 412 years of maintenance fees, Nate. Even at the orphan rate, the debt is astronomical. Unless someone pays it, the facility has legal authority to terminate the contract. Lucas dying all over again. Nate felt the familiar rage building in his chest. No. Nate, I understand your feelings about the orphan program, but this is different. This isn't just any pod. If word gets out that we have the last Shivalan princess, there'll be pressure from a dozen different factions. Some will want her awakened for political purposes. Others will want her to stay asleep. And all of them will be watching what we do. Then I'll wake her up now, Nate said firmly. Before the debt matters. Before politicians get involved. I'm her guardian, right? The protocol said only I can authorize her awakening. Hayes stared at him. You want to wake up a 400-year-old princess? Nate, think about this. She'll be completely alone. Her empire is gone. Her family is dead. Everyone she ever knew has been dust for centuries. What kind of life are you waking her up to? A life, Nate said quietly, which is better than dying forgotten in a box because of money. Trust me, I know. The office fell silent. Hayes knew about Lucas. Everyone in the facility knew about Lucas. You have 48 hours, Hayes finally said. After that, I have to report this to the Galactic Heritage Council. Once that happens, the decision won't be yours anymore. So if you're going to do this, do it now. Nate stood. I need to prepare the awakening protocols. Nate, Hayes called as he reached the door. What you're doing, taking responsibility for her, it's either the most compassionate thing I've ever seen or the most foolish. I genuinely don't know which. Neither do I, Nate admitted. But I'm done letting people die alone because the system doesn't care. As he walked back to Sector 7, Nate's tablet displayed the awakening procedure for Pod 34L887. It would take 72 hours, 3 full days of gradual warming, neural stimulation, and system restoration. 72 hours during which he'd essentially be betting his entire future on a princess from a dead empire, a girl who'd been asleep since before his great-grandparents were born. He stopped in front of her pod, looking at her peaceful face through the frosted glass. Okay, Valara, he said softly. I don't know if you can hear me in there. I don't know if this is the right choice. But nobody deserves to die forgotten. So here's the deal. I'm going to wake you up. When you open your eyes, your empire will be gone. Your family will be gone. Everything you knew will be history. But you'll be alive, and I'll be here. He initiated the sequence. The pod hummed with new energy as it began the long process of bringing its occupant back from 4 centuries of sleep. Nate pulled up a chair. He'd done this before, staying with a pod during awakening. He'd sat with Lucas for 48 hours, talking to him, telling him about the future he'd wake up to. Lucas never heard any of it, but maybe Valara would. My name's Nathan Cross, he began, settling in for a long night. But everyone calls me Nate. I'm 31 years old. I'm not anyone important. I'm just the guy who fixes freezers. But for the next 72 hours, I'm going to tell you everything about the world you're waking up to. And I promise, when you open your eyes, you won't be alone. The pod continued its slow work, warming a princess 1 degree at a time, bringing her back to a galaxy that had forgotten she existed. Somewhere in the depths of stasis dreams, Valara Shivalan began the long journey back to consciousness, unaware that her guardian had already decided she was worth saving. Hour 17 of the awakening process found Nate still talking, his voice hoarse but determined. So that's coffee, he explained to the unresponsive pod. It's this beverage humans are basically addicted to. You'll probably think it tastes like dirt at first. But trust me, you'll end up drinking it by the gallon once you discover how exhausting consciousness actually is. The pod's monitors showed steady progress. Valara's brain activity was increasing, her body temperature rising gradually toward normal. She was climbing out of the deep well of stasis, one slow degree at a time. Nate had barely left her side. He'd brought meals from the cafeteria, ate them while continuing his one-sided conversation. He'd called in sick to his regular shift, something he'd never done in 9 years of working at the facility. Supervisor Hayes had approved it without comment, understanding that Nate was essentially midwifing someone back to life. "Denver's changed a lot since your time," Nate continued. "After first contact, the city became a hub for cryogenic storage. Something about the altitude and natural cooling climate made it ideal. There are over 1 million people here now, and about 19% are aliens. You'll fit right in. Well, except for the whole princess thing. That might get some attention." He paused, checking the monitors. Neural activity spiked, then stabilized. She was dreaming, the pod reported, memories surfacing as her brain reactivated. "I wonder what you're dreaming about," Nate said softly. "Your family? Your home? That day they put you in here?" He reached out, touching the pod's glass. "Whatever it is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you lost them. I lost my brother 4 years ago. Different circumstances, but the same result. He's gone, and I'm still here, wondering if I did enough." The confession hung in the quiet facility. Nate had never said those words out loud before. "Maybe that's why the protocol chose me," he continued, "because I know what it feels like to fail someone I was supposed to protect, and I've spent 4 years trying to make up for it by protecting everyone else. 47,000 orphans in this facility, and I've learned the story of every single one, where they came from, why they went into stasis, who they were waiting for." He pulled out his tablet, scrolling through files. "Pod 12A332, that's Torvin. He was a Krellian merchant who went into stasis to wait out an economic collapse. That was 300 years ago. His entire species evolved past the need for physical currency while he slept. Pod 28F119, that's a Xylith child named Mira. Her parents put her in stasis during a plague, promising to wake her when it was safe. The plague ended 200 years ago. No one ever came back for her." Nate's voice cracked. "So yeah, I talked to the pods. I remember them. Because if I don't, who will?" At hour 48, Valara's eyes began moving beneath her eyelids. REM sleep. The pod was introducing dream cycles, preparing her mind for consciousness. Nate had learned basic Shivalan during the awakening process, downloading language files to his translator implant. He wanted to be able to speak to her properly when she woke. "Guardian Cross," a voice interrupted. Dr. Chen, the facility's medical director, had entered Sector 7 with a medical team. "We need to monitor the final 24 hours. This is unprecedented, waking someone who's been in stasis for over 4 centuries. There could be complications." "She's going to be okay," Nate said with more confidence than he felt. "Physically, probably," Dr. Chen agreed. "But psychologically?" "Nate, she's waking up to discover that her entire civilization is extinct. That's trauma on a scale we can't fully comprehend. She'll need support." "She'll have it," Nate promised. Dr. Chen nodded. "The Guardian Protocol includes some interesting provisions. According to Shivalan law, which still holds weight under galactic heritage statutes, you're now legally responsible for her welfare. It's not just symbolic, Nate. You're essentially her family now." The weight of those words settled on Nate's shoulders. Family. He'd failed his actual family. Could he really do this for a stranger? Even one he'd been protecting unknowingly for 3 years. At hour 68, Valara's vital signs reached normal ranges. The pod began its final preparations, stimulating her nervous system, preparing her muscles for movement after centuries of stillness. Nate had cleaned himself up, changed into fresh clothes, trying to look presentable. He wanted her first sight of him to be someone trustworthy, not an exhausted wreck. Almost there, he whispered. You've been asleep for 412 years, Valara. But you're going to wake up now. And I'm going to be here. I promise. At hour 71, the pod's voice announced, "Final stage initiation. Occupant will achieve consciousness in approximately 1 hour." Nate's hands were shaking. What would he even say? How do you tell someone their entire world is gone? Dr. Chen placed a hand on his shoulder. Just be honest. That's all you can do. The final hour crawled by in agonizing slowness. The medical team prepared for any complications. Supervisor Hayes arrived, witnessing history in the making. A few other technicians gathered at a respectful distance, curious about the orphan who was actually a princess. At hour 72, the pod chimed. Awakening sequence complete. Consciousness restoration in progress. The frosted glass began to clear, revealing Valara fully for the first time. Even unconscious, even after 4 centuries, she was breathtaking. The golden markings on her face seemed to shimmer in the facility lights. Her silver hair caught the illumination like starlight. Then her amber eyes opened. For a moment, she simply stared at the pod's ceiling, confused. Then panic set in. She gasped, hands flying to the glass, eyes wide with terror. "Open it!" Nate ordered. The pod hissed, seals releasing. The glass slid open, and Valara tried to sit up, only to collapse immediately. Her muscles hadn't been used in 4 centuries. She would have fallen if Nate hadn't caught her. "Easy," he said in Shivalan, his translator struggling with the ancient dialect. "You're safe. I've got you." She looked up at him with those impossibly amber eyes, confused and afraid. "Where am I? Where is my father?" This was the moment Nate had been dreading. He helped her sit up slowly, supporting her weight. "My name is Nathan Cross," he said gently. "You're on Earth, in a city called Denver. You've been in cryostasis for 412 years. He watched understanding slowly dawn, followed by horror. 400? No. Father said it would only be a few months, just until the war ended. The war did end, Nate said softly. 200 years ago. I'm so sorry, Valara, but the Shivalan Empire fell. Your civilization is gone. She stared at him, and Nate could see her entire world shattering in real time. My father? I don't know what happened to him, but if he'd been alive, he would have come for you. The records show no contact for 412 years. A sound escaped her throat, something between a sob and a keen of grief. Nate held her as she processed the incomprehensible. She was shaking, her breathing ragged. Why? She finally whispered. Why did you wake me? If everyone is gone, if everything is lost, why bring me back? Nate met her eyes, seeing the genuine question there. She was asking why death hadn't been kinder than this awakening. Because you deserve to live, he said simply. Because nobody should die forgotten in a box over money. Because for 3 years, I've been maintaining your pod, and I didn't even know you were a princess. I just knew you were alone, and I know what that feels like. Something in his voice must have reached her, because she stopped shaking. You're the one, the guardian the protocol chose. Apparently, I was just replacing a circuit and suddenly your pod decided I was worthy or something. I don't really understand it. For the first time, the smallest hint of something like curiosity crossed her face. The Guardian Protocol only activates for individuals who demonstrate pure altruistic protection. You protected me without knowing who I was, without expecting reward. She touched his face, and Nate felt that strange warmth in his chest intensify. I can feel it, the bond. You're genuinely connected to me now. Yeah, that's been feeling weird for 3 days. Despite everything, despite the devastation of her circumstances, Valara let out a sound that might have been a laugh. Weird. After 4 centuries of sleep, I wake to a guardian who calls a sacred Shivalan bond weird. Sorry. That came out wrong. No, she said, and there was something almost grateful in her voice. It's honest. I appreciate that. Dr. Chen approached cautiously. Princess Valara, I'm Dr. Chen. I need to run some tests to ensure you're healthy after stasis. Valara looked at the medical equipment with confusion. This technology is so primitive. What year did you say it was? 2112, Nate supplied. 412 years ago, we had medical scanners 3 times more advanced than these. She looked around the facility. This is all so archaic. Well, excuse our backward human technology, Nate said with a slight smile. Valara met his eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. Then she said, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to insult your world. I'm just overwhelmed. I know, and you're allowed to be. You just lost everything. Not everything, she said quietly, that strange warmth in her chest reminding her of the guardian bond. Apparently, I gained you. The statement hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to address. Over the next few hours, Dr. Chen confirmed that Valara was in perfect health. The Shivalan physiology had handled stasis remarkably well. She'd need physical therapy to regain full muscle function, but otherwise, she was a healthy 19-year-old woman. A 19-year-old woman who just learned she was the last of her species' royal line. Nate arranged temporary quarters for her in the facility, a small apartment usually reserved for visiting researchers. He helped her walk there, supporting her weight as she learned to use legs that hadn't moved in centuries. This is where you'll stay, until we figure out next steps, he explained. It's not much, but it's private and comfortable. Valara looked around the modest space. I once lived in a palace with 10,000 rooms. This would have been considered quarters for a low-ranking servant. She paused. But right now, it feels like more space than I know what to do with. Nate helped her to the couch. I'll bring you some food. Do Shivalan eat the same things as humans? Our biology is similar enough. Though I haven't eaten in 400 years, so I'm not sure what I'll be able to tolerate. I'll start you with something simple, maybe soup. As he turned to leave, Valara called out, Nathan? He looked back. Thank you, she said quietly. I know I didn't give you much gratitude earlier. I was processing everything. But thank you for remembering me when the entire galaxy moved on. Nate felt a lump in his throat. Call me Nate, and you're welcome, Your Highness. Just Valara, she corrected. I'm a princess of nothing now. The title means nothing. It means you mattered to someone once. That still counts for something. After he left, Valara sat alone in her new quarters, processing the impossible. 412 years. Father was gone. Mother was gone. The empire was gone. She was alone in a primitive human facility, bound by ancient protocol to a man who fixed refrigeration units for a living. She touched her chest, feeling the guardian bond humming there. It was strange, that connection. She could sense Nate's emotions even at a distance. His concern for her, his determination to help, and underneath it all, a deep well of grief that matched her own. What have you gotten me into, Father? She whispered to the empty room. But even as she grieved, part of her recognized the truth. Nathan Cross had given her something no one else in the galaxy had offered in 4 centuries, a reason to keep living. Even if that reason was just him refusing to let her die alone. And perhaps for now, that was enough. The next 2 weeks were a study in culture shock, grief, and unexpected moments of laughter. Valara's physical therapy progressed quickly. Shivalan physiology recovered from stasis faster than human, and within days, she could walk without assistance. But emotional recovery was another matter entirely. Nate found her crying in her quarters on the 3rd day. She was holding a tablet, displaying historical records of the Shivalan Empire's fall. The war lasted 60 years after I went into stasis, she said, her voice hollow. 60 years of my people killing each other. And in the end, what was left was absorbed into the Galactic Confederation. The Empire just ceased to exist. Nate sat beside her, not touching, just present. I looked it up too. I'm sorry, Valara. There were 40 billion Shivalan when I went to sleep. According to these records, there are maybe 2 million now, scattered across the galaxy. No unified government, no royal family, just refugees absorbed into other cultures. But they're still out there, Nate offered. Your people aren't extinct, they're just changed. They forgot me, she said bitterly. The last heir to the throne, and they just moved on. They didn't know you existed. The records were lost when your pod was transferred between facilities. To them, you died 400 years ago. Valara looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. Would it have mattered if they'd known? Would anyone have come? Nate didn't have an answer for that. But grief wasn't constant. Between the tears came moments of discovery that bordered on comedy. Nate had brought Valara to the facility cafeteria for her first real meal. She'd been living on medical nutrition supplements, but Dr. Chen had cleared her for solid food. This is called pizza, Nate explained, placing a slice in front of her. It's basically human salvation in circular form. Valara examined it suspiciously. You eat this? Everyone eats this. Trust me. She took a cautious bite. Her eyes widened. She took another bite, then another. Within minutes, she'd devoured 3 slices. This is obscenely delicious, she declared. Why didn't the Empire have this? Apparently. You guys were too busy with fancy 7-course meals to discover the joy of cheese and bread. We were fools, Valara said seriously, reaching for another slice. Nate laughed, and Valara found herself smiling. It was the first time she'd smiled since waking. He introduced her to coffee, which she initially hated, but kept drinking out of stubborn determination to understand human culture. By day 10, she was drinking it religiously. I think I'm becoming addicted, she admitted. Welcome to humanity, Nate replied. He showed her Denver, taking her to see the mountains that surrounded the city. Valara stood at an overlook, staring at the snow-capped peaks with wonder. We didn't have anything like this on Shivalan Prime, she said quietly. Our capital was built on flat plains. I've never seen mountains before. Really? You were princess of 40 billion people and never saw mountains. I was 19 when I went into stasis, Nate. And I spent most of those 19 years in the palace, being trained to rule. I never saw much of anything. There was something heartbreaking about that admission. Nate realized that for all her royal status, Valara had lived a remarkably small life. Then we'll have to fix that, he said. There's a whole world out here. You should see some of it. They established a routine. Nate would work his regular shifts, then spend evenings with Valara, teaching her about the modern world. She was a quick learner, her royal education making her adaptable despite the culture shock. But there were hard moments too. One evening, Valara asked Nate about his brother. They were sitting in her quarters, watching an old movie, when she suddenly said, "You mentioned losing your brother. Will you tell me about him?" Nate tensed. He hadn't talked about Lucas with anyone in years. His name was Lucas, Nate began slowly. He was 3 years younger than me. When he was 14, he got sick. Cystic fibrosis. The doctors said cryostasis could save him until genetic therapy advanced enough to cure him. But it didn't, Valara said softly. No, he died because I couldn't afford to keep his pod running after our parents died. The facility pulled the plug, and I sat there watching him fade away. He was 21 years old in biological time and never woke up. Valara reached out, taking his hand. Among Shivalan, physical touch was rare and significant. You didn't fail him, Nate. The system failed you both. I tell myself that. But every day, I wonder if I could have done more, worked harder, found more money somehow. And that's why you work in the orphan sector, Valara realized. You're trying to save everyone you couldn't save then. Yeah, I guess the Guardian Protocol picked up on that. Valara squeezed his hand. For what it's worth, Lucas would be proud of you. through your pain, you've saved 47,000 others. That matters, including you, especially me. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. Then Nate pulled away gently, uncomfortable with the intimacy. But Valara had felt it through the guardian bond. The connection that had formed between them was growing stronger, evolving beyond simple duty into something more complex. On day 15, everything changed. A Shivalan ship arrived in Earth orbit, requesting permission to land in Denver. The message was specific. They were seeking Princess Valara Shivalan. Supervisor Hayes called Nate and Valara to his office, where a holographic communication showed a Shivalan man in elegant robes. He looked remarkably similar to Valara, with the same luminescent skin and silver hair, though his golden markings were different patterns. "Princess Valara," the man said with a bow. "I am Lord Tavril, representative of the Shivalan Restoration Coalition. We had despaired that you were lost to us, but word has spread of your awakening. This is a miracle." Valara stood frozen. "The Restoration Coalition?" "Yes, Your Highness. There are still those of us who remember the Empire's glory, who wish to see it restored. And you, the last heir with legitimate royal blood, are the key to that restoration." Nate felt a chill run down his spine. Something about this felt wrong. "What exactly are you proposing?" Valara asked carefully. "Come with us. Let us take you to our settlement on New Shivalan. We have resources, supporters, a plan to rebuild what was lost. You could be the foundation of a new empire." It sounded like a dream come true. But Nate's instincts, honed by years of dealing with facility politics and bureaucratic doublespeak, were screaming warnings. "We'll need time to consider," Valara said. "Of course, Your Highness. But please do not take too long. There are those who would prefer the old empire stay buried. Your safety may depend on swift action." The communication ended. Valara turned to Nate, her expression conflicted. "This is what I was born for. To lead my people." "Maybe," Nate said carefully. "But born for something doesn't mean you have to do it." "What do you mean?" "I mean you've been awake for 2 weeks, Valara. You're still processing 400 years of loss. These people show up the moment you're vulnerable and offer you purpose. Don't you think that's convenient?" "You think they're lying. I think they want something from you, and I don't think it's your leadership. I think it's your bloodline." Valara stared at him. "You're saying they just want me to produce heirs. I'm saying be careful. You don't owe anyone your body or your life just because of who your parents were." For a long moment, Valara said nothing. Then she nodded slowly. "You're right. I need to think about this carefully." But that night, alone in her quarters, Valara faced a choice she'd never expected to make, between duty to a dead empire and freedom to choose her own path. She touched her chest, feeling the guardian bond. Nate's concern for her well-being was genuine, but so was his respect for her autonomy. He wasn't telling her what to do. He was reminding her that she had choices. For someone who'd spent her entire life being told her purpose was predetermined, that was revolutionary. The next morning, Lord Tavril arrived at the facility in person. He was charming, eloquent, and everything Valara had been trained to expect from Shivalan nobility. "Walk with me, princess," he invited, gesturing to the facility gardens. Valara agreed, but insisted Nate accompany them. Tavril's smile tightened slightly, but he acquiesced. As they walked, Tavril painted a picture of restored glory, a new empire rising from the ashes. Valara at its head, a symbol of continuity and legitimacy. "Of course, you would need to marry," Tavril mentioned casually. "Establish the royal line properly. We have several candidates from noble families who would be honored to serve as your consort." "Serve as my consort," Valara repeated, "not be my partner." "Well, the marriage would be largely ceremonial. Once you'd produced an heir, you'd be free to pursue your own interests. We understand the role is demanding." Nate's fists clenched. He'd been right. They wanted her womb, not her leadership. "And if I refuse?" Valara asked quietly. Tavrel's expression hardened slightly. "Princess, you have a duty to your people. Surely you understand that. Your personal desires are secondary to the needs of the Shivalin." "The Shivalin seem to have done fine without me for 200 years, Valara observed, "because they had no choice. But now you're here. To refuse your duty would be unfortunate." There it was, the subtle threat. Nate stepped forward. "I think this conversation is over." Tavrel looked at him with barely concealed contempt. "Human, this doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does. I'm her guardian. That gives me legal standing under Shivalin law, which you just invoked. And right now, I'm invoking guardian privilege to end this meeting." For a moment, Tavrel looked genuinely angry. Then he smoothed his expression. "Very well, but Princess, think carefully about your choice. The Coalition has resources and influence. We can offer you protection, purpose, a chance to honor your heritage. What can this human offer you? A life of mediocrity in a freezer facility." After he left, Valara turned to Nate. "He's not entirely wrong. What kind of life can I have here?" "I don't know," Nate admitted, "but it would be your life, your choice. Isn't that worth something?" Valara looked at him. This ordinary human who'd refused to let her die forgotten, who treated her like a person rather than a political tool. And she realized something profound. For the first time in her life, someone was asking her what she wanted, rather than telling her what she should do. "Yes," she said quietly. "That's worth everything." But the choice ahead of her was still terrifying. Duty to a heritage that had abandoned her, or freedom in a world she barely understood. Princess or person. Legacy or life. And the decision would define everything that came next. The tension built over the next week as Lord Tavrel made his case publicly. News of the last Shivalin princess had spread across the galactic networks. Suddenly, Valara's existence was a matter of political importance. Tavrel appeared on news broadcasts, eloquently arguing that Valara represented living history. "She is the last connection to a 12,000-year-old civilization," he proclaimed. "She belongs with her people, not abandoned in a human facility maintained by a common technician." The characterization of Nate as common didn't bother him, but watching Valara's face as she heard herself described as belonging to anyone made his chest ache. "He's making me sound like a museum artifact," Valara said, watching the broadcast in her quarters. "To him, you probably are," Nate said quietly. "A valuable piece of history to be preserved and controlled." But Tavrel wasn't relying solely on public opinion. On day 23 after Valara's awakening, Supervisor Hayes called them both to his office with grim news. "The Restoration Coalition has filed a legal claim," Hayes explained, his expression sympathetic. "They're arguing that Valara is cultural property of the Shivalin people under the Galactic Heritage Protection Act. They want her repatriated to their custody." "I'm not property," Valara said, her voice shaking with anger. "Legally, it's complicated," Hayes admitted. "The act was designed to prevent cultural erasure. It allows civilizations to reclaim artifacts, knowledge, and yes, even individuals who represent significant heritage value." "There has to be a legal defense," Nate protested. "There is. The Guardian Protocol. As Valara's chosen guardian, you have legal standing to contest the claim. But it means going to court, facing a tribunal. And quite honestly, the precedent isn't in your favor." Nate looked at Valara. Through the guardian bond, he could feel her fear and anger mixing with something else. Exhaustion. She'd been fighting since the moment she woke up, fighting grief, fighting culture shock, and now fighting for basic autonomy. "We'll fight," Nate said firmly. The hearing was scheduled for 1 week later. In the meantime, something unexpected happened. Support began flooding in from across the galaxy. Other former orphans who'd been awakened reached out to Valara. They understood what it was like to wake to a changed world, to be pulled between duty to the past and hope for the future. A Xylith woman named Mira, who'd been awakened from orphan status 3 years earlier, sent a message. They tried to make me return to my homeworld too. Said I had responsibilities. But I'd been asleep for 200 years. Everyone I loved was dead. I chose to stay here and build a new life. You have that right too. Even some Shivalin spoke out. A historian named Dr. Vela posted a viral essay arguing that true honor to the Empire meant allowing its last princess the freedom to choose her own path. We cannot resurrect the Empire by imprisoning its symbol. That's not restoration. That's necromancy. But the coalition had resources and influence. They brought in legal experts, cultural anthropologists, even former Shivalan military officers who spoke of duty and honor. The night before the hearing, Nate found Valara on the facility roof, staring at the stars. "Can't sleep?" he asked, joining her. "I keep thinking about my father," she said quietly. "His last words to me were, 'You are the future of our people. Survive, my daughter.' I thought that meant I was supposed to preserve the Empire, but maybe he just meant I was supposed to live. What do you want, Valara? Forget duty. Forget heritage. What do you actually want?" She was quiet for a long time. "I want to matter as myself, not just as a symbol. I want to choose who I become rather than being told. I want." She looked at him, and through the guardian bond, Nate felt the depth of her next words before she spoke them. "I want to stay. Here. With you." The admission hung between them, heavy with implications. The guardian bond had grown beyond duty into something neither had acknowledged out loud. Affection, connection, something that might become love if they gave it time. "The coalition will say you're being manipulated by the bond," Nate said carefully. "That you can't make free choices because of it. The bond doesn't control my feelings, Nate. It amplifies them, makes me aware of yours, and I know what I feel." She turned to him. "Do you know what you feel?" Nate's throat was tight. "I feel like I'm supposed to be protecting you, not falling for you. I feel like you deserve someone who can offer you more than a small apartment and a job fixing refrigerators. I feel like I'm being selfish by wanting you to stay. That's not what I asked. I know." He took a breath. "I feel like you're the first person who's made me want to live instead of just survive since Lucas died. I feel like the Guardian Bond showed me something I was too broken to find on my own. And I feel like if you leave, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been." Valara smiled, sad and hopeful at once. "Then let's fight for that tomorrow." The hearing took place in a grand chamber in Denver's Galactic Affairs building. On one side sat Lord Tavril and his team of lawyers. On the other, Nate and Valara with a single attorney provided by the facility. The judge was a 3-member tribunal, a human, a Krellian, and surprisingly, a Shivalin elder named Magistrate Kelvar. Tavril's case was eloquent and passionate. He spoke of cultural preservation, of duty to heritage, of the tragedy of allowing the last princess to languish in obscurity. "Princess Valara represents 12,000 years of continuous civilization," he argued. "To leave her in the care of a human who cannot possibly understand the weight of her heritage is not just negligent, it's a form of cultural violence. She needs to be with her people, to learn who she was meant to be." Then it was their turn. Nate stood, his hands shaking slightly. He wasn't a lawyer or a politician. He was just a guy who fixed cryopods. But he'd promised to fight for Valara, and he wouldn't back down now. "Your Honors," he began, "Lord Tavril keeps talking about what Princess Valara represents, her heritage, her duty, her value as a symbol. But he hasn't once talked about what she wants, because to him, that doesn't matter. She's a tool to rebuild an empire, not a person with autonomy." He looked at Valara. "I'm not going to pretend I'm anyone special. I'm a maintenance technician. I live in a small apartment and eat ramen for dinner 3 nights a week. By any objective measure, I can't offer Princess Valara the life she was born to." "Then you concede our point," Tavrel interjected. "No," Nate said firmly. "Because Valara was never born to anything. She was born a person. The princess part was imposed on her, and for 19 years she was told what to do, how to act, who to be. Then she was frozen for 412 years, while everyone she loved died and her empire fell." His voice strengthened. "She never got to choose. Not once in 431 years of life, but now she can. And Lord Tavril wants to take that away by saying, she has duty, has responsibility, has heritage she must preserve. He wants to freeze her again, just in a different way." Nate turned to the tribunal. "The Guardian Protocol chose me because I protected her without knowing who she was, without expecting reward, just because I believed no one should die forgotten. That protocol is built into Shivalan law because your people understood something important. True protection means respecting autonomy, not controlling it." He faced Tavrel directly. "You don't want to protect Princess Valara. You want to use her, and the law shouldn't allow that, no matter how prettily you dress it up as cultural preservation." The chamber fell silent. Then Magistrate Kelvar spoke, her ancient voice carrying authority. "Lord Tavril, your passion for Shivalan heritage is noted, but I must ask a direct question. If Princess Valara were to go with you, what would her life entail?" Tavril straightened. "She would be educated in proper Shivalan culture, married to suitable nobility, expected to produce heirs to continue the royal line, and honored as the figurehead of our restoration efforts. And if she refused any of those expectations, well, naturally there would be consequences. One cannot accept the benefits of royal status without accepting the responsibilities. So she would not be free to choose her own path. Your Honor, with respect, freedom is not absolute. We all have duties based on who we are." Kelvar nodded slowly. "I see. Princess Valara, you have remained silent. Speak now. What do you wish?" Valara stood, her voice steady despite the fear Nate could feel through their bond. "I am grateful that anyone remembers the Empire," she said. "But I am not the Empire. I'm a girl who was 19 when her father kissed her goodbye and promised she'd only sleep for a few months. I'm someone who woke up to discover that everyone she loved was 400 years dead. And I'm a person who's been given a choice for the first time in her entire life." She looked at Tavril. "You want me to resurrect an empire that collapsed because it valued duty over compassion, legacy over life. You want me to marry someone I don't love to produce children I'm not ready for, to become a symbol rather than a person. And you call this honor?" Then she looked at Nate. "This human offered me something no one else in the galaxy did, a chance to matter as myself. He protected me when I was nobody. When I was just orphan pod number 34 L887 with no name, no family, no one to remember I existed, he chose compassion over duty. And he's never asked me to be anything other than exactly who I am." Her voice broke slightly. "So yes, I choose to stay with my guardian. Not because the bond controls me, but because he's shown me that being Valara is more important than being a princess of a dead empire. Let the empire stay dead. I want to live." The tribunal members conferred quietly. Then Kelvar spoke. "The coalition's petition is denied." The words echoed through the chamber. Tavril stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. You would abandon our cultural heritage to the whims of a confused girl and a human with no understanding of Shivalan significance?" Magistrate Kelvar's eyes hardened. "Lord Tavril, I am 247 years old. I remember the empire before its fall. I remember what destroyed it. The belief that individuals existed to serve the state, rather than the state existing to serve individuals. You want to resurrect that mistake." She gestured to Valara. "This young woman has endured more loss than most beings experience in 10 lifetimes. She deserves the dignity of choice. The Guardian Protocol exists precisely for situations like this, to ensure that protection comes without control. Nathan Cross has demonstrated that protection." You have demonstrated only the desire to control. But the heritage, Tavril protested. Heritage that demands sacrifice of autonomy is not worth preserving, Kelvar said firmly. Princess Valara may choose to explore her heritage on her own terms, in her own time, but she will not be forced. This tribunal finds that the Guardian Bond is legitimate, that Nathan Cross has fulfilled his duties admirably, and that Princess Valara has the legal right to determine her own path. Petition denied. The gavel struck, and it was over. Valara felt her legs go weak with relief. Nate caught her, supporting her weight as they left the chamber. Behind them, Tavril's angry voice faded into insignificance. Outside, in the cool Denver evening, Valara finally let herself breathe. I can't believe that worked, she whispered. You were incredible in there, Nate said. The way you stood up to him, the way you articulated what you wanted. That took courage. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. They stood together in the fading light, and Valara realized something profound. For the first time since waking, the future didn't feel like a burden. It felt like possibility. But that evening, back at the facility, reality set in. Valara had won her freedom. But what would she do with it? I have no money, she said, sitting in her temporary quarters. No education in modern systems, no marketable skills for this era. I'm a princess trained to rule an empire that doesn't exist. What am I supposed to do now? Nate considered. Well, what did you study as a princess, besides ruling? History, philosophy, diplomatic protocols, Shivalan literature and art, strategic thinking, none of which translates to anything useful in 2112. Actually, that's not true. You know more about Shivalan history than almost anyone alive. There are universities that would pay for that expertise, museums, cultural preservation societies. Your knowledge isn't useless, Valara. It just needs a new context. She looked at him with surprise. You think I could teach? Why not? You're articulate, knowledgeable, and you've literally lived through history. I think you'd be amazing at it. The idea took root. Over the following days, Nate helped Valara research options. The University of Denver had a xenoanthropology department that was immediately interested when they learned about her. Within a week, she'd been offered a position as a visiting scholar, teaching about Shivalan culture and history. It's not ruling an empire, she said, looking at the offer. No, it's better, Nate replied. You're keeping the empire alive in the way that matters, memory. You're making sure people understand what your civilization was, the good and the bad. That's more valuable than any political resurrection. Valara started her new role cautiously, but quickly found she loved it. Students were fascinated by her first-hand accounts. She didn't just teach history, she brought it to life with stories of the palace, the culture, the complexities of an empire that had lasted 12,000 years. And in teaching, she found purpose that didn't require sacrificing herself. Meanwhile, her relationship with Nate deepened. They moved slowly, both aware of the weight of the Guardian Bond and wanting to ensure their feelings were genuine rather than manufactured by alien protocol. One evening, 2 months after the hearing, they sat on Nate's apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Can I ask you something? Valara said. The Guardian Bond, it will extend your life, won't it? Nate had learned about this from Dr. Chen. The bond wasn't just emotional, it had physical components. It would extend his lifespan by approximately 30 years, bringing it closer to Valara's natural 800-year span. About 30 years, yeah, he confirmed. That means you'll live to maybe 110 if you're lucky. I'll live to 800. Do you understand what that means? We could have 70 or 80 years together, and then I'll have 700 years alone. I know. Doesn't that terrify you? Nate turned to her. What terrifies me is not taking the chance. Yeah, you'll outlive me by centuries. But would you rather have 80 years of genuine connection followed by 700 years of beautiful memories, or 800 years of safety and solitude? That's not fair. You're making it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. We have time together, not as much as we'd like. But how many people get even that? My brother got 21 years. Some people get even less. You and I might get 80 years of really living. That's not a tragedy, Valara. That's a gift. She leaned against him, and Nate wrapped his arm around her shoulders. When you put it that way, I suppose 80 years sounds rather wonderful. Besides, who knows what medical advances will happen in the next few decades? Maybe they'll figure out how to extend human lifespan even more. Now you're just being optimistic. Someone has to be. You're the brooding, tragic princess. I'm the optimistic mechanic who talks to frozen people. She laughed, and the sound was becoming more frequent these days. Easier, less weighted with grief. But life wasn't all romance and philosophy. There was still work to do. Together, Nate and Valara founded the Guardian Project, a non-profit organization dedicated to awakening cryogenic orphans and helping them adapt to the modern world. Valara used money she'd received from selling most of her imperial artifacts to museums, keeping only her father's medallion as a personal remembrance. Their first awakening was a success. A Xylith child named Mira, the same one who'd sent Valara the supportive message. She'd been in stasis for 203 years, put to sleep during a plague by parents who never returned. Valara and Nate helped her wake to a world where the plague was long defeated, and helped her find her place in it. The Guardian Project grew slowly but steadily, awakening orphans and connecting them with resources, education, and support networks. Each person they helped felt like a small victory against the system that had let Lucas die. 3 months after the hearing, Nate took Valara to visit Lucas's grave. She'd asked to meet his brother in whatever way she could. The cemetery was quiet, snow dusting the headstones. Nate knelt by Lucas's marker, brushing snow away from the engraved name. "Hey, Luke," he said softly. "I brought someone to meet you. This is Valara. She's complicated. Princess from a dead empire, older than our great-grandparents, and somehow puts up with me." Valara knelt beside him. "Hello, Lucas. Your brother talks about you often. He carries tremendous guilt about losing you, though I've tried to convince him it wasn't his fault. Perhaps you could weigh in on that, if the universe works the way we hope it does." Nate felt tears burning his eyes. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you, Luke. I tried so hard. But I want you to know, what happened to you, it wasn't meaningless. It broke me, yeah. But through being broken, I learned to see all the other people the system was breaking. I couldn't save you, but I've saved thousands of others because of you. The Guardian Project, all of it. It exists because you taught me that every life matters, even when the system says it doesn't." Valara took his hand. "Your brother would be very proud of the man you've become, Nate. I know I am." They sat in the snow for a long time, Nate grieving and healing simultaneously, Valara providing the silent support he needed. "I think he'd like you," Nate finally said. "Lucas always had good taste in people. I wish I could have known him." "Me too, but in a way you do. Everything good about me. Everything that made the Guardian Protocol choose me. I learned from watching my little brother face impossible odds with courage. He's part of why I am who I am." As they walked back to the car, Valara said, "You know what I've learned these past months?" "What's that?" "That heroism isn't always about grand gestures or saving empires. Sometimes it's about showing up day after day for people who have no one else. It's about remembering the forgotten. It's about refusing to let the system turn people into numbers. That's what humans do best, I think. You see individuals when everyone else sees statistics." "Is that why the alien princess fell for the freezer mechanic?" Nate teased gently. "I'm not a princess anymore." Valara said firmly. "I'm just Valara, a teacher, a survivor, someone learning to build a life on her own terms. And yes, someone who fell for an extraordinary man who thinks he's ordinary. I am ordinary." "No, Nate. You're proof that ordinary people doing compassionate things can change the universe. There's nothing ordinary about that. As winter gave way to spring in Denver, Valara and Nate continued building their lives together. The Guardian Project awakened its 10th orphan. Valara's classes at the university became so popular they had to move to a larger lecture hall. And slowly, carefully, they let their relationship become what it had been growing toward since the moment the Guardian bond formed. One evening, 6 months after Valara's awakening, they stood on the facility roof again, looking at the stars. "I've been thinking," Valara said, "about what you said, about taking chances even when the math doesn't favor us. Yeah? I want to try, really try, not just as guardian and protected, but as two people who choose each other. I know I'll outlive you. I know it will hurt when you're gone. But you were right. 80 years of connection beats 800 years of safety." Nate pulled her close. "You're sure? Because once we do this, once we really commit, I'm all in. I don't do anything halfway." "I'm sure. For the first time in 431 years, I'm choosing something for myself, and I choose you." They kissed as the Denver lights sparkled below and the stars shone above. Two people from impossible circumstances finding something genuine in the space between duty and freedom. 2 years after Valara's awakening, the Guardian Project had awakened 73 cryogenic orphans and helped them integrate into modern society. The organization had grown beyond anything Nate had imagined, with volunteers across 3 continents and funding from multiple sources. Valara had published 2 books on Shivalan culture, bridging the gap between historical record and lived experience. She'd become one of the foremost experts on her own civilization, teaching at universities and consulting for museums. The last princess of a dead empire had found new purpose as its primary historian and cultural ambassador. And Nate had been promoted to Director of Orphan Services at the Denver facility, a newly created position that gave him authority to reform the system that had killed his brother. No more would cryopods be disconnected simply because funds ran out. The Guardian Project had partnered with the facility to create endowments, ensuring every orphan had time to be found or awakened properly. Their apartment was small but comfortable, filled with an eclectic mix of human and Shivalan artifacts. Valara had learned to cook pizza from scratch, insisting it tasted better homemade. Nate had learned basic Shivalan calligraphy, painting traditional poetry on their walls. They'd built a life together, piece by piece, choice by choice. But some chapters never truly close. One morning, Valara received a message from an unexpected source, Dr. Vela, the Shivalan historian who'd supported her during the hearing. He wanted to meet. They gathered at a coffee shop in downtown Denver, Valara and Nate on one side of the table, Dr. Vela on the other. "Thank you for meeting me," Vela began. He was elderly for a Shivalan. His golden markings faded with age. "I have something to tell you, Princess. Something about your father." Valara's breath caught. "My father. I was a court historian during the war. I knew Emperor Shanvel personally, and I was there the day he put you in cryostasis." Nate took Valara's hand under the table, steadying her. "After you were sent away," Vela continued, "your father fought for another 3 years. When he knew defeat was inevitable, he recorded a message. He asked me to preserve it, to find you if you ever woke. I've carried that responsibility for over 400 years, and now I can finally fulfill it." He placed a small data crystal on the table. "Your father's last words to you." Valara stared at the crystal with a mixture of longing and fear. "I don't know if I'm ready to hear this." "Take your time," Vela said kindly. "I've waited 4 centuries. I can wait a bit longer." But Valara picked up the crystal with trembling fingers. "No, I need to know. Whatever he said, I need to hear it." Back at their apartment, they loaded the crystal into a holographic projector. The image that appeared stole Valara's breath. Her father. Emperor Shanvel, looking exactly as she remembered, though wearier, more defeated. He wore his formal robes, and behind him, she could see the palace burning. My daughter. The recording began, and Valara started crying immediately. Nate held her as she listened to her father's voice for the first time in 412 years. If you're seeing this, then I am gone, and you have survived. I hope you can forgive me for the choice I made, for putting you in that pod and sending you away. I hope you understand it was the only way to save you. The Emperor paused, composing himself. The war is lost, Valara. Our empire is falling, but empires are just structures built by people, and structures can always be rebuilt. What matters is the people themselves. What matters is that you survived. He stepped closer to the recorder, his expression intense. I need you to understand something. When I said you are the future of our people, I didn't mean you should resurrect the empire. I meant that you carry forward everything good about who we were. Our curiosity, our love of beauty, our capacity for compassion. Those things don't need an empire to survive. They just need someone to remember them and live them. Tears streamed down Valara's face. Don't let anyone tell you that you owe your life to duty, her father continued. Don't let anyone force you to be something you're not. I am giving you the greatest gift a parent can give, the freedom to choose who you become. Be Valara first, princess second. Or don't be a princess at all. Just be happy. Just be free. Just live the life I couldn't give you. The recording flickered. I love you, my daughter. More than empire, more than legacy, more than any duty or honor. I love you. And wherever you are, whenever you wake, know that you made me proud just by existing. You owe the universe nothing. You owe yourself everything. Choose wisely. Choose joy. Choose life. The hologram faded. Valara sobbed, and Nate held her through it. This final grief, this unexpected gift. Her father hadn't wanted her to sacrifice herself for the empire. He'd wanted her to be free. He would have liked what you chose, Nate said softly. He would have been proud. I know, Valara whispered. I know. After the recording, something in Valara settled. The last piece of guilt, the lingering question of whether she'd betrayed her father's wishes, dissolved. He'd given her permission to live on her own terms 400 years ago. She'd finally received the message. 6 months later, the Guardian Project held its 100th awakening ceremony. 100 cryogenic orphans given new chances at life. Each one a small victory against the system that prioritized profit over people. Valara gave the keynote speech at the celebration. She stood before the crowd, former orphans and their families, volunteers and donors, and spoke from the heart. I was orphan 34L887 for 409 years, she began. A number in a database, a forgotten princess in a box, and I would have died that way if not for one man who decided that everyone, even unknowns, even orphans, even aliens from dead civilizations, deserved to be remembered. She gestured to Nate, who stood off to the side looking uncomfortable with the attention. Nathan Cross taught me something profound. That humanity isn't about grand gestures or saving empires. It's about showing up. It's about remembering the forgotten. It's about refusing to let people become statistics. Every person we've awakened through this project, every life we've helped rebuild, it exists because one ordinary human believed that compassion matters more than convenience. The crowd applauded, but Valara wasn't finished. We can't save everyone. The universe is too big, too complicated, too filled with systems that fail people. But we can save some. We can remember some. We can show up for some. And those individual acts of compassion, they ripple outward. They change cultures. They redefine what it means to be civilized. She looked directly at Nate. My guardian taught me that protecting people means respecting their autonomy, that love means offering choice. That heroism means doing the right thing even when no one's watching, even when there's no reward, even when it costs you everything. Her voice strengthened. So to everyone here who's been awakened, who's been given a second chance. You owe nothing to the past, except to remember it. You owe everything to the future, to the choices you make, to the life you build. Don't let anyone tell you that you exist to serve some greater purpose. You are the purpose. Your happiness, your freedom, your choices, they matter intrinsically. The applause was thunderous. Later, after the ceremony, Nate and Valara walked through downtown Denver, hand in hand. "That was quite a speech," Nate said. "I meant every word." "I know you did. That's what made it powerful." They stopped at their favorite coffee shop, the one where they'd met Dr. Vela. As they sat with their drinks, Valara said, "I've been thinking about something." "Dangerous pastime," Nate teased. "I'm serious. I want to formally renounce my title, legally, completely. I want to stop being Princess Valara Shivalin and just be Valara Shivalin, or maybe Valara Cross, if you're interested in making that kind of commitment." Nate nearly choked on his coffee. "Are you proposing to me?" "I'm suggesting that after 2 years of building a life together, it might be time to make it official, unless you're not interested." "Not interested?" "Valara, I've been carrying a ring in my pocket for 3 months trying to find the perfect moment to ask you." "You have." He pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a simple silver band with a small golden stone. "It's not fancy. I'm still a guy who fixes freezers for a living. But the stone is amber, like your eyes. And the band is silver, like your hair. I was going to ask you at sunset on the mountains, or something romantic like that." "This is perfect," Valara said, tears streaming down her face. "Coffee shop where we learned my father's last message, in the city that became our home. Just 2 people choosing each other. It's perfect." Nate slipped the ring on her finger. "So that's a yes?" "That's an enthusiastic yes. Though I should warn you, Shivalin weddings are complicated. We'll figure it out. We've figured out everything else." They married 3 months later in a ceremony that blended human and Shivalin traditions. Dr. Chen officiated. Supervisor Hayes gave Valara away, having become something like a father figure to them both. Every orphan the Guardian Project had awakened attended, a room full of people who understood what it meant to be given second chances. During their vows, Nate spoke from the heart. "Valara, you've taught me that broken things can heal, that grief can transform into purpose, that the universe sometimes rewards people who just keep showing up. I promise to show up for you every day for as long as I live. I promise to support your choices, celebrate your victories, and hold you through your losses. I promise to be your guardian not through protocol, but through choice. Every single day, I choose you." Valara's vows were equally powerful. "Nate, you saved my life before you ever knew my name. You remembered me when the galaxy forgot. You protected me and then gave me freedom. You showed me that love doesn't require sacrifice of self. I promise to choose you every day, to build this life with you, to honor your memory even when you're gone. For however long we have, I'm all in." They kissed to thunderous applause. 2 people from impossible circumstances who'd found something genuine and built it into something permanent. 5 years after Valara's awakening, they stood on the roof of the Denver facility, the same place they'd stood so many times before. The Guardian Project had awakened over 300 orphans. Valara's 3rd book was being published. Nate had successfully reformed cryogenic orphan policies across 3 planets. "Do you ever regret it?" Nate asked. "Choosing this life over restoring the Empire?" Valara laughed. "Never. Not once. I have work I love, people I've helped, and a partner who sees me as Valara first and a historical curiosity second. That's worth more than any empire. Even knowing I'll be gone long before you. Even knowing that. Because you've taught me something important. It's not about how much time we get. It's about what we do with the time we have. And I'd rather have 60 or 70 years of genuine partnership with you than 800 years of obligation to people who wanted to use me." Nate pulled her close. "Good answer." Besides, Valara added with a smile, we're changing things. The Guardian Project, it's spreading. Other species are adopting similar models. We're making it so fewer people end up as orphans, so more people get second chances. That's a legacy worth building. Look at you, talking about legacy. Not imperial legacy, human legacy. The kind that measures success in lives improved rather than territories conquered. They watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Two people who'd chosen each other against all odds, who'd built something meaningful from grief and chance. You know what the best part is? Nate said. What? We still have so much time. Decades to keep doing this work, to keep helping people, to keep choosing each other. Most people don't get that certainty. Most people don't have guardian bonds that come with life extension benefits, Valara pointed out. True. Though I like to think we'd have made it work anyway. We would have, because that's what we do. We figure things out. As night fell over Denver, they headed home to their small apartment filled with mixed cultural artifacts and chosen memories. Tomorrow, they'd wake and continue their work. They'd awaken more orphans, teach more classes, reform more policies. But tonight, they were just Nate and Valara, two people who'd found each other through compassion and protocol, who'd chosen love over duty, life over legacy, and each other over everything else the universe might have wanted them to be. And in choosing each other, they'd proven something profound, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply remember someone's name when everyone else has forgotten. That protection means offering freedom. That love means supporting choices. That humanity, in the end, is measured by how we treat the forgotten, the abandoned, the orphans of the universe. One person at a time. One choice at a time. One act of compassion at a time. And that was enough to change the galaxy. The universe rewards those who show up for people when no one else will. Nate was just doing his job, maintaining pods that society had forgotten, when he accidentally activated a protocol that recognized something most systems overlook, that true protection comes without control, that genuine compassion expects nothing in return, and that the smallest acts of remembering can change someone's entire existence. Valara was supposed to be a princess, a symbol, a tool for political restoration. But because one human decided that a nameless orphan in a box deserved maintenance and care, she got to be something far more valuable, herself. Free to choose her path, to build her life on her own terms, to transform from princess of a dead empire into teacher, partner, and guardian of other forgotten souls. Their story reminds us that we don't need to save everyone to matter. We just need to show up for someone. We need to remember names when systems reduce people to numbers. We need to offer protection without demanding control. We need to give people choices rather than obligations. So here's what I want you to think about. Have you ever been the guardian someone needed, even if they never knew your name? Have you shown up for people when it wasn't convenient, when there was no reward just because it was right? And here's the deeper question. How many times have you let systems convince you that some people don't matter enough to remember, that some lives are acceptable losses, that compassion is impractical? Write the word guardian in the comments if this story reminded you that small acts of compassion can change someone's universe. Then tell me where you're from, because I want to know where in the world people still believe that showing up for the forgotten matters. And if you believe that humanity's greatest strength is our refusal to let people become statistics, hit that like button. Subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things through simple compassion. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that their small acts of kindness ripple further than they'll ever know. Comment below about a time when someone showed up for you when you felt forgotten or when you showed up for someone else. Thank you for spending these 90 minutes with Nate and Valara. Thank you for believing that stories about compassion, choice, and protection matter in a universe that often tries to convince us they don't. Remember, you don't need protocols or powers to be someone's guardian. You just need to show up. You just need to remember. You just need to care when no one else does. And that, more than anything, is what makes us human.